Welcome back to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. Today we are talking mid-price midfielders. We got some really great names to go through. Let's go!
G'day and welcome again to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Casey, and you can find me on Twitter at Ball Boys Fantasy, and joined once again without a wardrobe change this time. Oh, I should have said that. Luke Rojo, how are you, mate?
Good, mate. Good. Talking mid-prices today.
Which is more difficult, I would say, to really, I guess, get a good one, but when you do get a good one, they can really blow up. See last year with a bunch of those young guys, Sarong, Tom Green, Warpool, who was forever my friend, always believed in him. Setterfield, all these guys can actually change your fortunes when it comes to AFL Fantasy, and we're going to discuss some of the best options we think going around.
Absolutely. Who are we starting with, mate?
We're going to start with an old bugger, Cam Guthrie from the Geelong Cats. He obviously had an injury last season. You were telling me it was a toe injury? Or?
Yeah, he had a totally unlucky season. That was a stretch, wasn't it?
We're off to a good start here. All right, but yes, no, he did wipe out pretty early in round 6 and didn't play for the rest of the season. So I only managed how many games was that? 6 games? 6 games for the season. So he comes in at a bit of a discount off his 96 average from the previous season, which puts him at a price out figure of $84.4, $762,000.
He's a guy that's gone at 106 before.
He has got some big numbers. 110 actually he did in 2021. So
you know how old he is?
He's 31. Out. Cut.
I mean, talk to me about the Geelong midfield mix. I know you've got that stat that you like, that they had 30 different guys go through there. Is there a case to be said that if they want to have a young midfield, he could go in and be the leader of the young troops?
There is. Well, I guess the question is, what the fuck are Geelong doing? Like, are they...
great question.
Are they competing? Are they rebuilding? Are they trying to do both? Like, where is this team and what identity do they want to have? And in particular, I guess, what are they going to come out to do in the first 6 to 10 rounds of the season? Because I don't think... I mean, he's had 110 seasons in the past, so... Like, are we trying to have Cam Guthrie last us through to the buys? Like, what are we trying to do with him as a mid-price if you're selecting him in round 1? Because I would ask that question because if they are trying to win, he still is probably one of their best players, one of their best midfielders, so he will be in there a lot. But, yeah, it just... The 30 midfielders that went through there, or 30 players in the CBA is an alarming stat. Like, you've got more than an entire team's worth go into the midfield at some point during the season. Now, some of them weren't very much, but... It's definitely by no means one of those really tight-knit midfields that we like when it comes to fantasy scoring.
A question that I've asked you a couple of times already about lots of different players is what would you have to see in and the caveat on that is, can you trust what you see from Geelong sometimes?
I can never trust Geelong. The only player I've ever trusted in the recent seasons has been a Tom Stewart. I don't know. I've asked myself that question, and I don't really know. If he comes out and has an absolute blinder, maybe accompanied by some quotes from the coach to say, "Yep, our old blokes are going in there," or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, there would have to be several things pointing towards the fact that he is going to go back to that 2021 form.
Well, I mean, the narrative you can sell yourself is obviously like he was injured. So what did you say? He played 6 games. And what was his average across those 6 games? It was definitely higher than 84.
He averaged 87.
87, okay.
So,
but I think there were a few sort of low games.
So the first game was the clear anomaly there where he scored 54 points against the Magpies. They lost 103 to 125. So the rest of them, they were above 80s, 90s. There was one ton in there against the Hawks where he scored 111. And
one of his bloody little piggies wasn't good. So, I mean, he was hampered.
Yeah, he was hampered a little bit. So, like, I do think there's some upside. I guess the question is there enough upside to put him in there? And being 31, the previous 2 seasons, 22 games, 21 games in 2021, 17 in 2020 when there wasn't as many games. So the durability has actually been decent. But with a 31-year-old from Geelong, a team that historically is very comfortable resting players on any given week, it does make me nervous. So he needs to prove more than maybe a younger player would going into the preseason, would just be my overall rule. But I haven't ruled him out yet because he is someone that obviously we've seen him do 110 in the past. And I still think in terms of that midfield, he'd be the predominant guy in there.
Like, you'd have to think so if they're going for... I mean, even if they're going to blood a lot of young guys, you still want to surround them with some certainty, some... older guys. So he could be one of those guys, I'd say. You got to play a sound grab to lock it in, mate. So what are you going to play?
What are you doing? You've told you my feelings about 31-year-olds. Or do you... I know you're a bit more forgiving for the elderly.
It's a no at the moment, but he has actually snuck into the change rooms.
He's okay. Snuck in the change rooms.
I mean, he hasn't quite...
seedy, but
just a little peephole operator. He hasn't quite made it out onto the track, but he's got to know a couple of the boys.
Getting the water going, running water.
Peeling oranges a little bit. Should we play our maybe soundbite?
The maybe. Sure.
Wow, is it very nice? God, please, no!
Overlapping.
I mean,
no!
It stands to reason that's a maybe.
I think I'm more on the Steve Carell side there, but I'll leave myself the right to give him that 2% chance that he comes into my side. But, you've got to be pretty good to overcome the over 30s rule at Mitchmond. And, it's an uphill battle for Cam.
This next guy is a more interesting discussion, in my opinion.
I think so. And we kind of touched on him in the previous podcast, which if you haven't already, go and check out the Premium Midfielders podcast. It was a doozy, if I do say so myself. But
the question is, can Matt Crouch stand up?
Was he crouch his way through the season?
Just piggybacked on the back of my joke, mate.
I just, there's a few slow people out there, but
Now you're slandering the audience.
Probably shouldn't.
Prick, mate. I'm man of the people.
But he is, he's a weird case. Missed, he missed all but one game out of the first 18 games of the season. He was a sub in round 8.
Yeah.
But they came in at round 19 and just played out through the rest of the season and put up some decent scores.
High CBA numbers in that
High
time
CBA
too.
numbers.
So he's gone in those games close-ish to 70% CBAs. Which this is one I want to throw out to the community big time. It's like, what are Adelaide doing? If you're an Adelaide fan, Bales, you might be watching. Like, what is Adelaide going to do? Are they going to go young and quick and direct? Is the old brigade going to come in there? Crouch, Dawson, Laird? Like, what are we going to see? Because I feel like if you're playing Crouch in there, that's a very different strategically to playing Rochelle and Rankin. That's just the way I'm seeing it, but I want the community's help.
The way I see it, Matt Crouch, Rory Laird, whilst maybe different calibre of players, I see them very much in the same vein of player in terms of just like that contested guy, doesn't maybe use the ball quite as well.
Crouch pops out for a lot of +6s. He does get a lot of uncontested stuff.
And so does Laird as well, but I wouldn't say that that's necessarily their strength in terms of affecting the footy game and how they use it especially. But it's those other young guys, and I'll piggyback off your question to the audience, and I'll ask a similar question is, well, if you're an Adelaide fan, who do you think's going to be in there? But also, who do you want to be in there? Because I think that could be two different answers because, at least from a neutral point of view, when I was watching the Crows last year, to me, they looked better in games where you had those younger, more dynamic players moving through the midfield in a Rochelle, in a Saligo, that complemented those two staples in there in Laird and Dawson. But they closed the season with a Crouch, which, when, they had a chance to make the finals, and obviously there was a few controversial calls and things like that, but that was when, it was go time, and they lent on their guy, Matt Crouch. They listened to the Traders podcast. They signed him on a 2-year extension.
That's interesting too.
Which is another wrinkle. Would you sign a guy for another 2 years at his age if you just wanted him to be a depth piece?
I don't think so, especially given the last 5 games that he played and played hard to be. I'm just so lost with Adelaide. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I have the answers because I'm very much lost.
Say he comes out in the preseason. He's doing well. He's he's top 3 in CBAs. He's there in round 1. Is he someone that you're considering picking with all that in mind?
There's a yes, I am considering. And there's also, you know how I talked about wanting this year to start with, if I can, quite a vanilla team. If there's an argument in the community that says, okay, he's come out, a lot of people are, crouch, picking him. There's a case to be made that I might go, I'm going to cover, potentially.
Yep. What's
doesn't fill me with a heap of confidence just because I don't understand the move. Like if I was coaching, I feel obviously from an outside perspective, I feel as though I would inject the youth and the pace through there. So that's what's making it hard for me is I don't quite understand why he's in there.
And so what to piggyback off that question, what do you expect him to average? Like he went at 97.5 in those final chunk of games, and in that time he's 72%. So the role was what we expect it to be if he is in there. So is 100 priced at 81?
If he averages 100, that's a great pick.
It's a good pick.
Yeah.
Is it one that's worth the risk of him being dropped in a few weeks? Because he's not only a risk.
Well, that's the bit we don't understand. That's the bit we can't get our heads around. Is he going to be dropped? Is he in favour? What's the go over at Adelaide?
Yeah.
So I've got more questions than answers.
Yeah, I think there's definitely one we're going to monitor very heavily in the preseason. I've talked about the Adelaide Crows being one of the most fascinating teams when it comes to preseason watch. I think comments from the coach and just general discussion around Matt Crouch will also be a telltale sign in terms of what's like. What's the vibe of him? Like, is he, like you said, is he in favour? Is he someone that they're trying to pump up because he's going to be featured in a lot of games? Or is there not much news because maybe he's not, front and centre in this team in terms of week in, week out there on the park? So, very, very interesting player, I think. He's trained with Mitchmond. Has he trained with the Oxlongs?
He's even further out than Guthrie. So Guthrie's been sort of peeping in the change rooms. Crouch has kind of got the binoculars from the car park.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
But not, he's not another postcode. Like he's close enough to be watching the boys.
Right. Okay. That's fair enough. So, well, look, maybe he's another one of these ones.
No, God, please, no!
No, indeed.
That could turn into a yes.
It could be.
At any point.
I think we might have a few of those ones on this one. But before we move on to the next player, just a quick reminder, guys, that we are on the quest for 2,000 subscribers over on YouTube. So if you haven't already, if you're a podcast listener, just head over to the YouTube, hit that subscribe button, then you can leave that alone and go back to your podcast. And while you're there, give this video a big thumbs up and make sure you hit that bell whilst the preseason goes on. We've got lots of videos coming out talking all things AFL Fantasy. Let's talk about the next guy, another old bastard, and a player who the Brownlow curse hit hard over the last couple of seasons, and he presents some serious value based on what he has done before. But we talked about in the last podcast, like how much do we weight he's done it before versus new and upcoming players. I think this is a very that's very applicable to a player like Ollie Wines because he's priced at basically 78 points. He's gone over 111 on his Brownlow year, but it's a very different team to that year as well. So what are we doing with Ollie Wines, who's the player we're talking about next, who is in discussion out there? Again, he has that good buy round, no early buys. Is he someone that we can consider as a mid-pricer who's been at those heights before?
I say, why not?
Mate, I'm too slow on these. I've got to get... Why not? Is that how you actually feel? Or
no.
Just a joke?
That was just a bit. Yeah, sorry. I've got to prevent confusion.
Get it in.
I don't understand sort of what changes for him to get back to those heights.
Yeah.
So if there was something pointing to me that we're going to be going back to what Ollie Wines did. But the thing that, when I dug in a little bit deeper, the thing that interested me is, again, I thought, okay, well, maybe Port Adelaide there's been fewer stoppages recently, and I couldn't really find the correlation. Again, I'm no Popowski, but it just, to me, it's all roads lead to Butters and Rosie. Like,
Yeah.
why do we think that if Butters and Rosie, we know they're going to be 105, 110 guys, so that's what we feel. Why do we then expect Wines to suddenly be a 100 guy again?
Yeah. And look, I'm not going to rule out the possibility, but I don't. I don't think that he's going to be someone that I consider all too much because I just don't think that he's going to be the guy that he was remotely close to when he won his Brownlow. He won the Brownlow on the back of being basically the only true midfielder in a good team that year, and those two guys were playing forward and things like that, and they're clearly the future of this club. And the other thing, whilst and I didn't look too much into the stoppage games, but their fantasy scoring over the past few seasons is dramatically different. They were the lowest scoring team when it came to AFL fantasy points last year as a team. The previous 2 seasons when he was up in the averages, they were one of the better scoring teams and were very much up the top there. So
was his Brownlow year 21?
2021, yeah.
So in that year he had 75% CBAs and Boak was at 75% as well, but then, Willem drew. So Boak and Wines, the predominant midfielders, and then last year 50%. He had 50% with Rosie and Butters.
So I think he'll do that again. Maybe there's a little bit of upside in terms of instead of 50%, maybe he's closer to sort of 60, 65%. And look, 77 I think is unders, but I don't expect him to be... Look, I don't think he's going to average a ton this season. I think he's best case scenario, maybe the 90s guy that he was in the previous season. But even then, it feels like I'm kind of painting a positive narrative an optimistic view for him to get there. So I think there's a few more headaches than I'm willing to sort of live with to select an Ollie Wines. I just don't really see what's going to change that suddenly makes him a guy that is worth, getting that 20 points of value that we probably need from a midfielder, mid-pricer. And just the game style shift for Port Adelaide, who did very well, again, a game shift that worked in their favour. They had a great record last season. Obviously, didn't go so well in the finals, but, I think it doesn't favour him moving forward. So, to me, he gets one of these ones.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
No. Applies to this next team where we're going to break down 3 players all from the same team. A few interesting options, and again, we talked about LA Crows being a team to watch this preseason. I think North Melbourne are also one of the most fascinating teams to watch.
How many
this
roos
preseason.
in your team at the minute?
That's a very good question. I've got quite a few.
I've got an embarrassing amount to admit.
Okay, let me count them up. How many have you got while I count up my
I've got
my
6,
roos?
including the bench. But there's a case to be made. There's a case to be made that you could have more.
I've got 5. Yeah. Yeah, there's a few ones that might be in other people's teams that I don't have, but yeah, they're a very fantasy relevant team. This season, maybe more than any. But their midfield rotation, we're talking players here: Jai Simpkin, George Wardlaw, and I've also snuck on Dylan Stevens, who
I'm glad you did because
came over from Sydney as well.
I'm feeling him a little bit.
Oh, okay. Kev, settle down, mate. You and Cam Guthrie over there.
It's a bit like you and Bailey Smith, right? What was your go with Bailey Smith?
That was last year, mate.
Getting him off.
Yeah, I was just 2 years too early. He was. he's going to be big next year, 2025. Bailey Smith, first picked. But, well, first of all, before we maybe go into each specific player, what do we expect from North's midfield rotation this year? Who do we think are going to be the predominant players in that midfield rotation? I think no one would question LDU. Being
so
number
he's 83% guy last year. Sheasel, for me, comes in.
He comes into the mids.
Simpkin will be in the midfield as well.
Yep. So you have 3 players.
He was there last year. So Phillips.
Ooh. So I'm losing confidence there. But you think he's over Wardlaw?
So Cunnington's retired. So he only played early in the season.
Yep.
Wardlaw, I think when Wardlaw's healthy, he plays midfield.
Do you think he plays over someone like a Phillips? And the other question here, I guess, is like, how tight is their midfield rotation going to be? Like, is it going to be 4, 5, 6 players going there, or is it going to be a Geelong situation where you've got like 7, 8, 9 guys going in there for just chunks at a time? Because they got a lot of young talent that, just by the nature of where they're at their career, 3rd, 4th year, they, are at that point where you would expect them to be getting some midfield time, but there's a few of them that are there.
For me, Wardlaw won't play anywhere else. He's a midfielder. Whereas, so someone like Sheasel, I expect him to play midfield, but he obviously can play elsewhere. McKercher was their first pick. He's a midfielder, he's an under 18, but he'll likely play across half-back.
That half-back role is going to be real for him.
I think Phillips will still spend some time in there.
Yep. Stevens.
Stevens is the one I'm hoping can sneak in for a little bit of midfield time.
So he, coming from Sydney, I think he was a pretty highly regarded junior as well.
He's a 5th overall pick. This is the thing. The thing I like about it is Sydney. So Sydney are a great organisation in terms of developing young talent.
Yes.
And we obviously know about their famous culture, but we've seen on many occasions guys can leave Sydney and then
blow up.
The fucking Richmond captain and 3-time premiership ruckman wasn't getting a game at Sydney.
Yep.
I think he didn't get picked in their
best 22
for the grand final the previous year. And then Jordan Dawson. Like, let's having a look at. I know this might not paint the full picture, but Jordan Dawson's average fantasy points prior to
it was down.
leaving,
Like he obviously went massive.
He went in. Sorry, I shouldn't sort by season. So 66 in 2020. That's COVID. Yeah. But 88 in 2021, and then goes to Adelaide, and he's effectively now going to be talked about in the top echelon.
Yeah, so it's a very good point. Obviously, we've
not
got
comparing Stevens to Dawson.
No, but we've got several instances of that particular club producing players that play very well in other clubs when they can't get a game at Sydney. So
you think about Stevens. Stevens was getting a game, but I'm guessing it wasn't in the position that he wanted. But
he was playing a wing, I think, predominantly.
So some people are going to go, oh well, he wasn't good enough to crack the Sydney midfield. Well, have a look at the Sydney midfield,
and their wings especially.
Goulden, Mills, Warner, Papley goes through there a lot. It's
McInerney's on the wing. Yeah.
I think he had a few sub-affected games. I don't know. Just researching last night, I had this feeling of maybe this guy is a guy that can give you 20 points.
He's definitely someone to monitor, I do believe, because he had a really good pedigree as a junior, had some big averages, I think, in the before his draft class. Like you said, 5th overall pick, so comes in with a bit of, like I said, pedigree there. He's 23 years old, coming into a North Melbourne team that needs talents and needs those guys that can win the footy. The question to me is just going to be, okay, well, he's priced at 55. We probably need him to go 80, 85 to be the pick that we want him to be, which is 20 points above what he's done at his best in 2022.
He's played a lot of AFL, so he's probably played not as much VFL as someone who's been completely out of favour. But when he has played VFL since 2021, he averaged 105.
Yeah,
that's a long.
That's a good average for over a long period of time, and a good sort of sample size for us to use. So I do think he's someone worth monitoring. If I was to rank the order in which the North Melbourne midfield goes, I'd say LDU would be at the top.
Yeah.
I might also argue that Wardlaw is number 2.
Well, he can't. I shouldn't say he can't, but he is a midfielder.
Yeah, he's not a guy that you're playing wing inside. He's inside.
Yeah.
He's not a guy that sneaks forwards and kicks goals and takes hangers on people.
Fun to watch.
Great player. And if you actually look at his stats in terms of from a points per minute point of view, he is one of the better players in the comp. I think he averaged a higher points per minute than a Lachie Neale last season, who was infamously the Brownlow medalist from last season. But he had a low time on ground, so that's really affected his average. So if his time on ground increases and the CBAs increase, I do think there is a fair chunk of an ability for him to really break out. He also came in underdone. Like he didn't have a preseason essentially.
But injury, for me, it's an injury concern because he had injury concerns as a junior. They've now flowed into the beginning of AFL. The AFL system breaks these kids' bodies down to start with. They absolutely hammer them and then they build them back up. But there's that little flag, especially if you're expecting you want Wardlaw to again be 20, 25 points of overs.
He probably needs to again go that 80, 85 sort of mark, maybe more. 85 you'd be very happy with, I think.
Stevens has been in the system for a few years. He's 6 points less.
Cheaper,
They bought him to the club.
Yeah, okay. You're selling me. You're selling me.
We always talk about that as being a factor. It's they bought him.
The other factor is that they just cancel each other out, and they both get a little bit of it, but not enough to both to either be sort of ones we pick.
It'd be an intriguing watch.
So of all these 3 players, I'd probably go George Wardlaw number 1 in terms of my interest level.
Okay.
Stevens second, and then I've got Jai Simpkin last. So despite him being the most proven of the guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's the captain of the team, right? Is he? at least one of the captains.
Not sure.
But he's right up there in terms of leadership in the crew. But I just don't think, again, that argument of picking a player who's done it before, his career high, he's done it twice in a row, was 95.5. If he does that again this season, that would be 20 points of upside, which is that's what we need.
Yeah.
I don't think this is going to be a year where he has his career high, because in those seasons where he was 95.5, he was basically ahead of LDU as the number one guy in the midfield.
Yeah.
And even though I still think he's going to be in there, I don't think he's going to be in there to the same degree that he was in there in those seasons. So whilst he might be unders because he's got some injury-affected games, I think he's more of like an 85 rather than a 95. Is the way I see it.
I probably tend to agree with you there. I think if you just broadly ask yourself the question, is like, if you're North Melbourne, do you want the ball in the hands of Sheasel and LDU or Simpkin? And for me,
it's clearly the first two.
Sheasel and LDU.
Yeah.
So I just think that's the trajectory they're going to kind of go on.
Yeah. So while I think he's value, I don't think he's enough value.
Yeah.
And I think he also plays a bit more of that like selfless role as well, where he's, obviously leadership role, and he's probably more, trying to help the kids get better as well. So to me, I'm down on Simpkin. Wardlaw and Stevens are two guys I'm watching very closely. And again, North, no early buy. So always good to point that one out as well.
Anyone training with Mitchman?
Wardlaw is in there.
Really?
Stevens is on the watch list. Josh Simpson hasn't had a look in. He's in a different state. He's not even there.
What's the next level? So you go from you're on the field.
You're on the field training.
You're in the change rooms, peeping through the cubicle.
Binoculars.
Binoculars in the car park. Is the next one?
You've got
flying a drone from like multiple blocks away, like overtraining.
I'd say you've bought a plane ticket. You got a ticket, and you're just waiting for the call.
What if you live in the same state as Mitchman?
No one lives in the same state as Mitch. It's a mystical place.
Yeah,
that no one knows.
Oh, yeah. I know you love your fantasy, but not that kind of fantasy.
Not that fantasy.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next guy here, who I think is another player that deserves a decent amount of discussion, and that is Josh Ward, particularly after the news came out that Will Day is carrying a bit of an injury. He's got a stress fracture in his foot, which is nothing to sneeze at. That is a concerning thing for a young player. So Josh Ward, a lot of the people, our minds instantly go to who's going to get the bump in that when it comes to fantasy, the sickos that we are.
There's still some optimism that
he'll make round one.
Yeah, but stress, like you say, stress fracture can be a really ongoing thing, can't it?
Yeah, it can be. And it's also, especially with a team like this, even if he's there round one, sometimes it's enough to a young player get his foot in the door and just not let go. Like if he really comes in and just blows people away, and he might have the ability to move others out once he's got that opportunity. And Ward, who was a high draft pick, I think.
Massive numbers as a junior. I mean, it was he and it was Dacos' year, wasn't it? Where I believe so, and Dacos were our sort of two rookies that we had the most hope in.
He's been a bit up and down the first couple of years, but where do you think of Ward and I guess the Hawthorn midfield in general? Do you think that Ward's going to be the guy that benefits there, or is there maybe other players vying for that? And how do you sort of see this shaping out for him?
Based on the CBA numbers from last year, it stands to reason that Ward would be the guy that would benefit from Will Day being out. I remember watching him in his first season and then even last year as well, thinking, why did we not get this guy in the midfield? Like, this is what he was as a junior.
Yeah.
It was his bread and butter. So, I mean, what's he priced at? Because I haven't looked into him.
So he's priced at 75, which, again, it's that little bit of an awkward price tag, 676,000.
Yeah,
you're wanting
an
to
unproven
go 95 kind of thing. So
Yeah.
in rounds 1 to 5 and 16 to 19, which I've very much cherry-picked those stats, he averaged 35% CBA. And in that time, he averaged 82. So 35% for an 82 average. Even that doesn't get him to the point where we'd be locking him into our fantasy side. And look, maybe he gets more than 35%, but I don't know if I see him being like straight up in there into a 70% CBA role.
I mean, Newcomb and Nash are your big dogs in that regard.
Yeah, how much does Warple still get in there?
Yeah.
So
I think it's the issue here is what you need of him, isn't it?
That's right. If he was cheaper, he'd be definitely someone I'd look at. If he was maybe in a different line, I'd be looking at him more seriously. At the moment, he's on the watch list. He's in the parking lot with the binoculars, but he hasn't gone into the change rooms just yet over at Mitchman. So, Yeah, but it is going to be very interesting with the fallout of this Will Day injury to see what Hawthorn does because, I could come around to a player like him. I'm also pretty hot on his teammate Connor McDonald, who I think is probably the higher upside player and the guy in our forward lines that might overtake him this preseason. So I'm watching that battle play out in the
little
preseason.
Teaser for upcoming episodes. Eh?
Yes. All right. A couple of other young players here we're going to talk about next. Ruben Jinby from the West Coast Eagles, another guy who going into his second year, we expect him to feature pretty heavily in their midfield rotation. He is a great tackler. How much upside do we think a player like Ruben Jinby can have, and is it enough for us to select him as a mid-price midfield option? He's priced at 58, so compared to some of those other guys, a bit cheaper. So again,
I think he's got upside. I think he'll put, points on that in his second year. But again, what do we need from him? Is it 25 plus?
But 80, I think, would be the minimum you'd want.
I think he's a guy that's capable of getting an 80. What do we think about? I mean, West Coast, are we anticipating getting pumped every week again?
I think it'd be pretty similar to last year, to be honest. I don't see a huge amount changing.
It'd be tough for a second-year guy to go and give you a strong 80, 85 in a team that's getting...
Yeah.
I mean, the tackling numbers are solid.
They help his floor, but...
Tackling something that pretty fucking tough to sustain in the AFL.
Yeah.
I was going to say as a younger body, but he looks like a fucking brick shit house.
He's built a bit differently to other 19-year-olds. Who's he got starting the year? He's got Port, Giants, Western Bulldogs, Sydney. Those are
Sydney and Port are tough, aren't
some
they?
big midfielders as well. So, I've probably got more confidence in a player like Wardlaw having that second-year jump than I do a Jinby.
And they're similarly priced.
Both in crap teams. I just think that he doesn't quite have that outside of the tackling game, the rest of that accumulation game to really pop.
Yeah.
Kind of like a Sam Berry sort of type.
I think he's going to be better than Sam Berry.
I think he will be, but in terms of like
you're drawing,
year two. But sometimes those are the guys that really take their game to the next level, like Josh Dunkley or something like that. Start as tacklers and learn that accumulation style. But I don't know. I'm a bit pessimistic on a Ruben Jinby at this stage.
Tackling's I've found, on a side note, tackling is just a great way to anchor yourself in a footy game. Do you know what I mean? If things are not going your way,
you're involved at least somehow.
I'm not saying I ever laid a tackle, but tackling is a good way to go, okay, I'm in this game, I'm ready. And then you find that a lot of the rest of your game flows on from like that defensive pressure. So, like you said, I like a Josh Dunkley.
So his best scoring game of last season was a 96 against the Suns in round 9. He had 16 tackles in that game. 12 disposals and only one mark, but
is the definition of relying on tackles. And it's totally, if you have 16 tackles, you want a 140.
Oh yeah, he didn't even crack the ton. So
it's tough. Tough sell.
I think I'd want to see that first, rather than jumping on him in the early season. And we haven't touched on this before, but something that Selby's talked about in his winning years was he didn't necessarily start with these second year guys, but if you see something early on, they're the perfect kind of guys that you can jump to and pivot towards. But going out and starting with them without that concrete data it's a bold pick, I would say. All right, let's move on to one more, and maybe we'll see if we've got time to do some rapid fire. But we've got to get in there. Shout out to the Pod and Dossie for Paddy Dow as a guy who... Look,
well, the rule is Dossie's talking him up, so you cannot go near this guy.
Yeah,
don't touch him with a barge. Don't touch him with a barge pole because Dossie is too high on Paddy Dow, and we know the Dossie curse.
I wouldn't really give this much light of day, except for the fact that he's gone to St Kilda, and their midfield spots. There are midfield spots up for grabs. Like
you've
got Steele, you've got Crouch.
Billings of
who else? Who's their next 3 and 4 guys going in there? And he's obviously value. He's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sub-affected games. The games he did play in full, what is that? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games there in total where he played without that. Only one of them below 70. He's priced fairly cheaply.
Mate, sounds like you're going to invest. You're expecting an uptick in the Dow.
I think if he plays his value, uptick in the Dow. Yeah, wow, that's
don't gloss over it, mate.
I didn't even register at first. But his value, is he entrenched in this team? Like, is he there to play
Richmond or St
Kilda?
Kilda?
Kilda, like, because we've had a few years of this Paddy Dow kind of hope, and he's never done it, right? So
Dossie's gonna. There's gonna be one that he picks. It just explodes. You're gonna love watching him ride it. Maybe Paddy Dow's the guy.
Mate, you take as many shots, and one of them's gonna go. What's the saying? Broken clocks, right? No, we love you, Dossie. We love you, Dossie. But I think
Dossie and Paddy Dow, I think, look. Now, I've been known to get
you got conspiracy here.
Well, I've been known to get a doppelganger wrong. But at the quick glance, Paddy Dow and Dossie, I think they look similar. Well, I've never seen them in the same room.
I was going to ask, that's a very good point.
That's all I'll say. So, I mean, I've only seen Dossie's. I mean, the Pod Pod's on YouTube. It's a good opportunity for a shout out. That's how I've seen Dossie's mug getting around. So make sure
few more podcasts on YouTube. So welcome along, guys.
Check out Dossie and you'll get
squad.
more info on Paddy Dow than you will here. So.
Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, I don't feel confident picking him. I don't think he's entrenched in their best 22, and I just don't think he's very good. Is that fair to say? I just don't think he's like.
I'm not going to comment.
Yeah. I can't say I've watched him all that much either as well. So I watch him.
I can be convinced.
He can convince me.
Yeah.
He's got a ticket.
Now,
anyone else you want to throw out there as a
I want to talk about Carl.
Pick?
I think I want to talk about Carl Amon.
Okay.
He's a little more expensive. He's probably one of the more expensive of these mid prices.
Yes, let's have a look at his price tag. What is he? He's
what's
783k, so it does fit under that 800k cutoff that we had.
If he was a defender, would he be in everyone's teams? Let me ask you that
I think he'd be very much someone you'd consider.
So is it irresponsible to, pick a guy as like your M65 that you're anticipating will? I mean, it's last 5 games is what we're basing all our excitement on, if you want to call that, with Carl Amon. But is there a case to pick a guy in the anticipation that he then moves to your back line and opens up a spot in your midfield, or do you think that's silly?
Well, I'm having a bit of deja vu because we talked about this last season on a couple of different accounts. Number one was Nazai Wangani-Millera, who was moving into that half-back role from a wing. He was a bit of a different case because he's a younger player. The other player we also talked about was Jaden Short, who we thought was going to move into the back and score better, become a defender in round 6, and then he's going to be a top 6 defender. That didn't happen because he did play a bit more to the midfield and he didn't get DPP, I think, until round 12, or was it even round 18? I can't remember, but it took a while for him to get there. So there's risk involved there because if he's clogging up a midfield spot right up until the buys, that's less than ideal for a player that we don't think is going to be a top 8 midfielder.
It's probably one of those ones that if it comes off, it could have you looking like a rock star, but if not, you might look like a wanker.
You fucking look like rock stars, huh? And now we are a fucking bunch of wanker. Yeah, bunch of fucking clowns here.
Fucking clowns, yeah. Good. No, I like your little tie in there.
I was just,
you working that the whole time.
If people don't watch the F1, I mean, they'll have absolutely no idea what that was.
Yeah, but
I mean, really,
go and check it out.
Do you still watch it?
I've tuned out a lot last season.
Yeah, I was real
very fair weather sailor over there in the F1.
Yeah. When it came out on Netflix, we jumped on it. But that's good. He's a good fella, Gunter.
Yeah, he's a legend. So I think there's some level to it. So what did he go in his last 5? I'm trying to find. I've got some stats.
110 or close to the mark.
Jeez. Okay, so he scored very well. Last 3 average of 121. Jesus Christ. And you think is he 100% going into that back line? You think? Like, is there any question around that, or is he still someone who's going to play a little bit wing?
He played very well. How did Hawthorn play in the last 5? I mean, that's probably a little bit of a measure. If he was
James Sicily might have missed some times there. Was he? I just think there's a few factors at play here that doesn't just cement him as that guy who's 100% clear. I think it's a role change.
What if he comes out and gives you a 120 in a? He don't play round 0.
No, they don't play round 0 in the preseason
practice game. And he's in that role, and he's solid.
I'm considering more than I'm considering like a Jai Simpkin, for example. I think he's someone to at least. A lot of people wouldn't have him on the radar. Definitely in a draft format. I'm very much interested in him because I do think he will eventually become a defender.
What is he priced at again? Sorry,
he is priced at. Where is he priced at? 86.7. Okay. So for him to work out, he needs to be basically a top 6 defender and be that sort of 95 plus.
I think it's
doable.
There's a very real world where that happens.
Definitely.
If he's in that role, I'd almost just go as far to say as like that will happen.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a real possibility. I think it is maybe one of those ones that you might just look to trade him in once he does have the DPP and just remove that ambiguity away from will he get it, will he won't.
Playing with fire a little bit.
Yeah, just that Jaden Short example of last year just scares me off a little bit, is my personal view. But again, he's no early buy. So if you're picking him, again, you're not having to worry about that. So interesting. He's an interesting one that I think maybe if you haven't looked into him, I'd have a look.
Food for thought.
These other two guys, I don't think we really spend too much or even any time. But Finn Callahan is someone that some people have identified getting better. I don't think it's going to be enough to matter.
Why would anything change at GWS?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How good were they last year?
They were very good.
Why?
I think he's just a player who's just done well in juniors, and you expect him to get better, but I don't think it's going to be.
He is the symbol of why my season started so poorly last year.
You're going to put it all on Finn?
Well, I mean, I said he's the symbol of it. It was him instead of Kate Chandler, and it was Jerry instead of English.
Fair call.
Tell us the story.
And I just threw in Zach Jones in there because he is bloody cheap. If you've not looked at Zach
tell me
Jones,
how old, without looking, tell me how old you think Zach Jones is.
I know he's younger than he looks because of his egghead, but I want to say he's like 28.
Yeah, you got it. 28.
There you go, yeah.
But
he looks like he's 35.
I was shocked when I saw that.
He does.
I'm not a guy that can necessarily comment on that, but yes.
But he's looked that way for years too. So yeah, I don't know, but I just can't trust his body against St Kilda. I don't know what they're doing with their midfield rotation. It's a very interesting one to watch, but he is very cheap, very very cheap.
He is.
So I don't know. Have his name in mind. But let us know if you think we have forgotten anyone else in the midfield mid-prices. Comment it down below on YouTube. And again, remember, give us a big old thumbs up. Later in the week, we will be doing our midfield rankings for draft. And for those on Classic, you can also get some good value checking that one out. Make sure you are subscribed. And if you are listening over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, give us a 5-star rating and review. And if you give us a really funny and creative one, we might even read it out and give you a bit of a shout out on the pod. But until then, we'll see you guys later. Bye.